What is up, and welcome back to Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers on the Show Notes channel. As always, I am your host, Brandon Silvers, talking NFL today. It's been a while and a lot has happened, but I'm back. And if you're listening to me on January 11th, it's also my birthday. So subscribe and tell a friend to subscribe too. No theme music, no intro, long story, no time to explain. Let's get into it. All right, it's wild card weekend, so obviously the NFL regular season is over. If you recall, I did a preseason episode ranking who had the highest expectations heading into this season. This feels like a great time to look back at those rankings and see who exceeded expectations, who met them, and who failed to do so. Starting with the two guys who were tied for the top spot, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, a couple of quarterbacks who put up video game numbers and regular season wins, but it felt like a Super Bowl was necessary this year. We are guaranteed not to see a Lamar Jackson Super Bowl win. So let's talk about how and why he failed to meet expectations this season. The Baltimore Ravens started and ended the season in heartbreaking fashion. Their season opener against Allen and the Bills looked every bit like an impressive statement win for 3.5 quarters before an embarrassing collapse that saw them blow a 15-point lead. That loss snowballed into a 1-5 start that hit rock bottom, with Jackson suffering a hamstring injury that kept him out of 4 games. The fact that they turned things around enough to enter the final game of the season against their rival, the Pittsburgh Steelers, with a chance to make the postseason was part miracle and part weak AFC North. In that game, with 55 seconds left, they had the ball at midfield, needing just a field goal to win the division and make the playoffs. And like the rest of their season, the drive was a combination of silly penalties, spectacular plays, and poor execution, culminating in a missed 44-yard field goal by rookie Tyler Loop that wasn't even close. Days later, the organization decided to part ways with head coach John Harbaugh after 18 seasons. Rumor has it that the reason for that move was Harbaugh's refusal to part ways with offensive coordinator Todd Monken. It's been reported that Monken and Jackson didn't have the best relationship, which led to Harbaugh having to act as a bit of a buffer, which led to a strained relationship between Harbaugh and Jackson. I haven't seen any specifics on the issues between Monken and Jackson, but if I had to guess, it's because the play calling and decision-making were ridiculous. The usage or lack thereof of Derrick Henry stood out in particular. It's no coincidence that Lamar had a career year last year, his first playing alongside Henry. Lamar was already established as one of the most dynamic offensive weapons in the league. Pairing him with the greatest running back of his era was a nightmare for opposing defenses, if they use him. Derrick uncharacteristically lost a fumble in the fourth quarter of that season opening loss to the Bills, then again in the fourth quarter in their Week 3 loss to the Lions, and it seemed to me like Monken lost faith in him. This was made worse by Lamar getting hurt, which made opposing defenses' game plan simply stop Derrick in all caps. Now again, the man is Derrick Henry, so he did eventually get back on track, finishing second in rushing yards and touchdowns, including 570 yards and 6 touchdowns in the final 4 games of the season, but the damage had been done. Monken established a running back rotation that he seemed dead set on sticking to, which led to Derrick being on the sidelines on crucial plays, even near the goal line. It made the play calling more predictable, which made life that much harder for Lamar. On top of that, Lamar himself was not the runner that he typically is. This is probably due to that hamstring injury he suffered and the play calling. But before this season, Lamar has never had a year in which he averaged under 51.3 yards per game rushing as a full-time starter. This year, he barely hit half that, as he averaged just 26.8 yards per game. So now you've taken away his biggest run threat, and he's not the dynamic run threat that he typically is. So you've limited him to being a passer only. And while he's incredibly skilled as a passer, he's sometimes too skilled for his own good. Lamar can make every throw, but sometimes he gets into trouble when he tries to make every throw. And there was a lot of that this season where it just felt like he was trying to do too much. It was his worst season as a passer in terms of interceptions, interception percentage, bad throw percentage, completion percentage, and yards per game since 2022. It was especially jarring after last season's career year throwing the ball. My own quarterback bias is that I want the gunslinger quarterback. the Lamar Jacksons, the Patrick Mahomes, the Brett Favre, so long as he stays away from welfare money and texting women reporters. I want the QB who trusts his arm and goes out there and tries to make plays to win the game. However, I also recognize how quickly that can go wrong and lead to turnovers and drive-killing incompletions when a check down was open. Sometimes you just want Sam Darnold back there trying not to be stupid. You can win plenty of games that way as well. There were a lot of factors outside of Jackson's control that led to this bust of a season for Baltimore. Those factors also influenced his play as well. However, where he failed to meet expectations for me is by letting those factors influence his play to the degree that they did. Sometimes you get dealt a shitty hand, but you still need to play those cards. Lamar didn't play them up to his usual standard. Instead, he'd often make things worse by trying to do too much. I'd feel this way even if Loop's field goal split the uprights and Baltimore made the playoffs. He just wasn't the same Lamar. So hopefully Baltimore gets a new coaching staff in there that can get things straightened out, because he's still, a top 3 quarterback and in his prime. And I'll have to see Derrick Henry lost a step to believe it, but they need to go ahead and just flush this season. We're going to go ahead and give Josh Allen, who shared that tier with Lamar, an incomplete for the time being, since we're really looking for postseason success out of him. The Bills play Jacksonville on the road at 1 the day this is released, so this could be a very short-lived incomplete depending on how that goes. I will say the pressure on him is even higher because of who he won't have to face to reach the Super Bowl. Jackson and the Ravens obviously aren't in the way. Mahomes and the Chiefs, who have ended the Bills season like a million times, it feels like, they're not going to be there. Football is 11-11, offense, defense, special teams. But if Allen gets outplayed by a Trevor Lawrence or one of these other AFC playoff quarterbacks in a loss, look out. However, he did exceed expectations by marrying Haley Steinfeld. He was dead last in my starting quarterbacks who will marry an actress from a Ryan Coogler movie rankings from 2021. So this type of turnaround is unprecedented. Next on my expectation tier was the Detroit Lions. My goodness. This one hurt me because I love Dan Campbell as a coach. They needed to at least make the Super Bowl after last year's 15-win season and divisional round flop. There will be no divisional round flop at all this season because they failed to make the playoffs. While their defense did take a step back, the main cause of their failure to meet expectations was the loss of offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, who had an incredible season this year in his first year as head coach of the Chicago Bears. On paper, the Lions' offensive numbers were in the ballpark of what they were under Johnson, but in reality, it wasn't nearly as diverse or explosive. Running back duo Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery were good, but not great. Receivers Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jamison Williams each topped 1,000 yards again, but they were without tight end Sam Laporta after a Week 10 back injury ended his year. They just weren't quite as crisp as they were under Johnson, even when Dan Campbell took over play calling duties in mid-November. They could move the ball, but drives would stall out more often. Third down conversion percentage went from 48% to 39%. Fourth down conversion percentage went from 67% to 58%. They got into the red zone less, and they were a tick worse at scoring TDs when they did. The defense has been up and down under Campbell, and it certainly was down this year. They gave up 13 more passing touchdowns, which is ridiculous. But the offense was the red flag to me because it was a new problem. Expectations are going to be lower headed into next season, but Campbell's seat is going to be much, much hotter. Next up, I had Jaden Daniels, who needed to prove his standout rookie season wasn't a fluke, and he wasn't the next RG3. I'm very worried that this list is cursed in some way because Daniels missed 10 games due to injury, failing to meet those expectations. He started things off like Lamar Jackson did with an early hamstring issue, but returned only to dislocate his elbow in an RG3-esque injury due to coaches leaving him in late in a blowout where he had already spent all day getting lit up by the Seahawks defense. If you recall, RG3 also got hurt against the Seahawks old habits die hard. As far as his actual play is concerned, it's hard to say how good he is. I mean, he looked okay before that Seahawks game. The team took a huge step back, but it's hard to say Jaden did anything more than go through maybe a mini sophomore slump, similar to CJ Stroud, who I also compared him to in that episode. Now, unfortunately for Commanders fans, they're going to have to hold their breath all of next season with the injury concern, while also hoping that the team figures out how to win games again. I'm not kidding when I say that this list may be cursed. There were 2 coaches on it. Let's start with Brian Daboll. He needed to show any sign of being successful. He opened up his tenure as Giants coach with a 9-win season that really didn't look that great, then got immediately and catastrophically worse the next 2 seasons. Obviously, he failed to meet expectations and got fired this season after a 2-8 start, but it's how he failed to meet them that was absurd. So the Giants have been searching for a quarterback since Eli retired, and this year decided to draft Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss and also sign Mr. Unlimited himself, Russell Wilson. Russ is 37 like me. I can tell you from experience that being 37 makes playing quarterback in the NFL playing hard. That's why I'm not currently doing that. Russ hasn't been a consistently good quarterback of a playoff team since 2020. He is well past the point of lifting up a team. I don't think this is some huge secret. When you name him as your starter, you know what your ceiling is, unless you have a wildly talented team surrounding him. The Giants do not. Expecting anything different was silly. He had a very weird monster 450-yard, 3-touchdown game in between 2 absolutely pitiful games where he couldn't manage to throw for 170 yards. The result was the same for the Giants in all 3. They lost them all. Week 4 against the Chargers, the Jackson Dart era begins. His numbers weren't great, but he was electric. He can throw it a bit, but it's his ability to make plays with his legs that changed things up for New York. It added a dimension Russ really doesn't have anymore, and also helped hide some of the offensive line issues they have. It also set Dart up for injury. In that Chargers game, he had to head to the old blue tent to get his brain checked out. Russ was sacked and fumbled on the very first play that he came in to replace Dart, but luckily the Giants recovered. Dart was able to return the following drive, and the Giants pulled off the upset for their first win of the season. No doubt after watching what he just watched, Daboll is thinking, oh, okay, this kid might save my job, especially when 2 games later they are beating the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. Then, up 27-17 late in the 3rd, it happens again. Dart gets hit and heads to the blue tent. Russ comes in and misses badly on a 3rd down throw, looking very much like a player who was lacking in not only skill, but also confidence. Daboll is somewhere between livid and panicked. He is seen going into the blue tent where Dart was and also having a very animated conversation with a team doctor shortly afterwards that looked a hell of a lot like Daboll was yelling at him. To you and me, this looked like a man trying to convince the medical staff to run his possibly concussed quarterback out there to save his own ass. Now, Daboll claimed that he wanted to know whether or not Dart would be okay to go for it on 4th down, which really kind of aligns with what we were thinking he was doing. The NFL fined him, along with the team itself and rookie running back / blockhead Cam Scatterbo, who also went into the tent, for conduct detrimental to the league. The league and the players union released a joint statement, think about that, saying their actions created a, quote, perception that they were interfering with Dart's exam. The league found that they didn't influence anything one way or another, but it's worth noting that Dart was clear to return the next drive, and the Giants held on for yet another upset. That was Brian Daboll's last win as head coach of the New York Giants. Fittingly, his final game featured yet another Dart journey to the blue tent, and he yet again had to rely on Russell Wilson for nearly the entire 4th quarter of that game. They were playing the Bears. Russ came in near the end of a drive early in the 4th, managed to at least keep them in field goal range for a 20-10 lead, but that was it for the Giants offense that day. The Bears came back to win 24-20, and Daboll got fired. So not only did he fail to win, but he did so by going with the wrong starting quarterback initially, then endangering the next one to save his job, all while stripping away whatever confidence was left in Russ. There's a way to make that move while also making sure Russell Wilson is ready if you need him. Dable couldn't do that. You failed. Goodbye. The other coach on the list also failed to meet expectations. That is the very freshly fired Dolphins coach, Mike McDaniel. Unlike Daboll, McDaniel actually looked like a genius at times. He even made Tua look like an NFL quarterback for a very brief stretch, as Miami had the most exciting offense in the NFL. He needed to return the Dolphins to that form, but instead, they started the season 1-6 with the sixth loss being a blowout at the hand of the Cleveland Browns, with Tua throwing for 100 yards and 3 interceptions. Everyone in the world thought that that was the end of the line for Mike McDaniel. I mean, it's the Cleveland Browns. They started Dylan Gabriel at quarterback that game, and Mike had been carrying himself like a dead man walking for most of the season up to that point anyways. He knew. The press conferences where everyone fell in love with him, found him to be quirky and funny back when he was winning games, had turned into just this defeated man with a flat effect who appeared to be somewhere between trying not to fall asleep and trying not to cry. Improbably, he kept his job, and even more improbably, the Dolphins turned things around, winning 5 of their next 6, but the wheels came off as the season came to a close, and they finished 7-10 in an AFC East division featuring the 14-win Patriots and 12-win Bills. Honestly, it looked like he was about to survive that too, but very coincidentally, the Dolphins parted ways with him when John Harbaugh became available, and McDaniel is already being floated as an offensive coordinator option for teams like the Lions, who we talked about earlier, which is a pretty similar track to Cliff Kingsbury, whose path I said McDaniel was trying to avoid this season. After flaming out as the young offensive mastermind head coach of the Cardinals, Cliff is now offensive coordinator of the Commanders, who again, we talked about earlier, and they have their own set of problems. I think it's very important Mike gets another head coaching job as soon as possible to avoid that, but the man seems so burnt out that I don't know if he wants to go that route himself. He might just need some time out of the spotlight. Let's finish with the man I wish was out of the spotlight for good, Aaron Rodgers. You already know that the Steelers made the playoffs because Mike Tomlin's a wizard, and Rodgers met or exceeded expectations in both good ways and bad. On the field, he had way more left than I thought. He's certainly past his prime as he threw for a career-low 208 yards per game, but he's also more than serviceable as he also threw for 27 touchdowns to just 7 interceptions. Off the field, Rodgers continued his time-honored tradition of being a whiner who throws teammates under the bus. Win, lose, didn't matter. If Aaron thought you made a mistake, particularly one that made him look bad, he was going to talk about it in front of as many cameras as possible. He also managed to out-weird himself. He was seen wearing a wedding ring early in 2025. Then, shortly after signing with the Steelers, he confirmed that he had indeed gotten married to a woman named Brittany. He even specified that it's Brittany with an I instead of a Y. But nobody has ever met her. The Sporting News reported that nobody on the Jets, Aaron's last team, had ever laid eyes on her, and neither has anybody on the Steelers, as it was big news when she skipped the team's holiday party. The way I see it, there are 3 possibilities at play here. Number 1, Aaron is hiding his wife from any and everybody who knows him, which is weird. Number 2, Aaron got catfished, Manti Te'o style, which is also kind of weird. Or number 3, Aaron completely made her up, which is incredibly weird. None of these are things that a normal person would do. In fact, I'm having a hard time figuring out which one would be the weirdest. I almost want the Steelers to make the Super Bowl so that this topic dominates media week, but I don't want to risk him winning another ring. All right, that will do it for this episode. The second half of 2025 was a wild ride for me. I'm going to take some big swings coming up here in 2026. Thank you for sticking with me and watching, listening, rating, subscribing, reviewing, and sharing. Do not forget to head to the shownotes.beehive.com and subscribe over there as well. You'll get whatever I'm writing, including my weekly sports watch guide. Some say the greatest weekly sports watch guide in the history of the world. Hope you have a great week. Happy birthday to me, and I will catch you later.